I want to bring in NBC's national political correspondent, Steve Kornacki. NBC's Sahil Kapoor is in Erie, Pennsylvania, where the vice president will be later today. Maya Rupert helped lead Julian Castro and Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaigns. And Carlos Curbelo is a former Republican congressman from Florida and MSNBC political analyst. What a great panel. Okay, Sahil, how is the campaign trying to reach out to these key voting groups specifically?
Hey, Chris, well, this is a perennial concern for Democrats, holding their strong showing with black voters. And it came to the fore just a few days ago when former President Obama, campaigning in the Pittsburgh area, sounded the alarm very publicly about what he perceived to be a lack of enthusiasm, specifically among black men. Since then, Kamala Harris has put this in bold font as a goal that she wants to pursue. Just today, she plans to rally in the arena behind me in Erie, Pennsylvania, this bellwether county, and she rolled out what she called an opportunity agenda for black men. Let me tick through a few things that includes: 1 million fully forgivable loans for black entrepreneurs and others starting a business. It includes new funding for education and training programs. It would protect cryptocurrency in a new regulatory framework. And she proposes a new national health initiative to address sickle cell prostate cancer and other conditions that disproportionately affect African Americans. She's also calling for legalizing recreational marijuana to boost the industry. And of course, the context of this is, as you just showed, some polls, including our NBC News poll, found that Harris is winning 84% of black voters. Compare that to 2020, when exit polls found that Joe Biden won 87%, and a Pew study found that Joe Biden won 92% of black voters. So whichever way you slice this, she's underperforming a little bit. Most of that deficit comes from black men. And Chris, the other context here is that Donald Trump is trying to make some modest inroads with younger black men, mainly those who are working class, who are worried about the economy, who don't have the same cultural affinity to the Democratic Party that maybe, their parents have, which is why Democrats have been doing so well in the past. In a game of inches, in a game where a few thousand votes could be crucial in determining battleground states like Pennsylvania, Harris cannot afford any erosion among black voters, which is why I suspect we'll be hearing a lot more about that from her.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. So to pick up on it, Maya, the Times says, quote, almost any way we can measure it, Mr. Trump is running as well or better among black and Hispanic voters as any Republican in recent memory. I mean, is an opportunity agenda an answer to that? I wonder if this surprises you and what Kamala Harris can do about it.
I would say the opportunity agenda is a huge way to start to sort of focus on this issue. And I think what's important is that this isn't new for Harris. I think, as we just heard her say, she has not taken for granted any of the votes that she's trying to earn, and that includes black votes. I think that there is something we have to be really sort of sober about when we're talking about this kind of thing. The black vote, and specifically black men have been the second most reliable voters for the Democratic Party. That behavior, coupled with the fact that we're whatever poll we're looking at, we're still looking at an overwhelming majority of black voters indicating they're going to vote for Kamala Harris. I think
yes, but I do need to go back to the point that Sahil made and that the New York Times makes, which was he called it a game or an election of inches. Some people I talked to would argue that it's a game of centimeters at this point. It's that close. Even a drop-off of a few percentage points in, as you rightly say, the second most reliable Democratic voting group could be important.
Absolutely. And I think that is why exactly what Kamala Harris is doing is what needs to be done. It's taking a look at the policies, but also the message, and making sure that black voters understand that what she is rolling out, what she is talking about, is geared toward making sure that the pain points that they are experiencing every day are things that are going to be a priority for the administration.
And Carlos, I mean, all of this is despite Trump's racial grievances, right? The way he talks, for example, about migrants, his rhetoric in general, which Harris tried to address over the weekend.
Donald Trump cares more about scaring people, creating fear, running on a problem instead of what real leaders do, which is to participate in fixing problems. Well, I care about fixing fixing problems. And as President of the United States, I will be focused each and every day on solving problems that affect you and your family.
The first part of that, though, I think it's what I want to ask you about, Carlos, is that, yes, it is the politics of fear. Nobody disputes that. But for Donald Trump, it seems to work. If you listen to voters, a lot of his supporters say they read that as strength. So I wonder if you think Kamala Harris's argument that we just heard there will work.
Well, Chris, I think what the vice president said in that clip is true, but what she said in the earlier clip you played is also true. One of the big challenges Democrats are having is that they have taken a lot of these communities for granted for many years. They have felt entitled to the support of Hispanic Americans, of African Americans, and that just doesn't work that way, right? That whole idea that demographics is destiny, well, you have to work it and you have to have policies that those groups happen to agree with. The other problem, Chris, is that the activist class in the Democratic Party, where white progressive has to have a major influence, that weighs heavily on the Democratic Party. You take an issue like immigration, where for years the activists have demanded that the Democratic Party essentially process every single person that comes into the border illegally into the country. Well, it turns out a lot of Hispanic and African-American voters don't agree with that policy. So this erosion has been taking place for a few years now, and now the vice president is trying to halt it here just a few weeks before the election. I don't know that it's going to work.
So, Steve, tell us what else the new NBC News poll tells us.
Yeah, I mean, it tells us in our poll there has been a shift since last month. We have a 48-48 tie right now. A month ago, our poll showed a 5-point Harris advantage. Now, in the time in between what's happened, this first one was taken right after the Harris-Trump debate. We've now had the VP debate. Harris has given some interviews. There have been other intervening events. There's that shift. And underneath it, this might be the most significant finding here. A lot of numbers on the screen. Just look at the left to start with. This is the basic perception voters have of the candidates. We ask, is it positive or is it negative? And it looks about the same. 43 positive for Trump, 43 positive for Harris. Only a very negligible difference there, both with a high negative rating. But a month ago, it was different. A month ago, Trump's ratings were still very low. But Harris, look at this, had a 48 positive, 45 negative. A month ago, Harris had an advantage over Trump on image, on likability. In our poll, that advantage now a month later is gone for her. There's also this. There are some of the headwinds that Harris is facing here as the incumbent vice president in an unpopular administration. In our poll, Joe Biden's approval rating sits around where it has for a while, 43%. One of the reasons a lot of Democrats wanted Biden out as their candidate was the low approval rating. So interestingly as well, we asked in this poll, Donald Trump, when he was president, thinking back, do you approve or disapprove of how he did as president? A retrospective job approval rating. Well, look at this. It clocks in at 48%. That is 5 points higher than where Biden is right now. And I think also significantly, that's higher than Trump ever actually got when he was president for an approval rating in our poll. So it says that there's a bit of a rosier view of Trump's presidency now than when he was actually president. That seems to benefit him and obviously redound against Harris. There's this question, too, of issues. We asked it differently this time around. We tried to really pinpoint some of these by asking, is there one issue that is so important to you that you would vote entirely on the basis of that issue, perhaps? Abortion, when you ask the question that way, is the issue most mentioned. 22% of voters said it could be that important to them. You see immigration and the border underneath it at 19%. Now take a look at how the candidates stack up on these issues, and you see Trump's biggest advantage is on immigration and the border. He has a 25-point advantage over Harris. That's to say, you ask who would do a better job on immigration and the border by a 25-point margin. They're saying Trump. But that issue of abortion, which, again, more voters say that could be singularly decisive for them than any other issue, it is Harris's biggest advantage, 19 points over Trump on abortion. So that's where Democrats, again, they've leaned heavily into this message. They believe it is one that on Election Day could make a difference in terms of motivating voters to get out and vote for Harris, give them maybe some kind of a turnout advantage. That's their biggest advantage, and Trump's continues to be on immigration and the border. That 25-point edge is up for him from where it was a month ago.
Fascinating stuff. Steve Kornacki, thank you for that. I want to go back, Maya, to that retrospective number, though, because poll after poll after poll has showed that in people's memories, Donald Trump was a much better president than they actually said he was when they were living under Donald Trump as president. What do you do if you're Kamala Harris with that? How do you combat people's feelings and perceptions, which clearly are different than when they were actually living it?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think what that does tell us is something that we know. And I think the biggest thing for Kamala Harris is not to overreact to polls like this. We know that people tend to look differently and more favorably at the past than what they actually felt in the moment. And that she also knew that there is going to be some penalty for being the sitting vice president. Anything that is going wrong can very easily be, it can be sort of conflated with her. This is all stuff that she knew coming into this. It's October. And this is the tightening and the realities of it getting closer and closer to the time that people are voting. I think what you're seeing with her is exactly what the campaign needs to be doing, which is not focusing on the noise and focusing on getting a message out. Because the only thing that's going to combat people thinking they remember a rosier picture of a President Trump is reminding people what it was actually like and telling them about her vision for their future. And I think, again, as we're going to get closer to time of people voting, that is going to be the only poll that matters.